Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Piotr Kielowski, and I am the acting director of the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies at the University of Michigan. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third in our collection of lectures and talks for this semester, of course, being online because of the circumstances. But it is a wonderful pleasure to invite the eminent journalist and scholar Jacek Stawiski, who is the editor-in-chief of TVN24, a Polish 24-hour commercial news channel. He studied history at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, specializing in history of Polish Jews and international diplomatic history. And then at one point he joined the BBC World Service in London, but for some recently he has been at TV24, where he has his own show covering international affairs. In addition to his frequent appearances on television and in other media and in print, he has also been the author of two wonderful documentary films. Colonel House, which was a documentary about Edward House, who was a kind of eminence grise of under Woodrow Wilson's administration, who was crucial in pushing Wilson in certain directions, including the granting of liberation to Poland after World War I. His second one, We the People, which dealt with the aftermath of the first free elections in 1989 in Poland, and on Lech Wałęsa's speech to the US Congress in 1989, which revealed many new interesting facts. Some of you may have seen We the People. It was part of the Polish Film Festival this year. And many of us really enjoyed seeing this and learned quite a bit. Now, he writes many commentaries on the TVN24 website and writes in other media, but also lectures at the Jagiellonian University. So please, without any further ado, I welcome you to hear Jacek Stawiski, please.
Hello, good day, happy midday in Michigan, and happy evening to everyone in Europe. It's 6 o'clock here in the ancient capital of Poland, in the city of Krakow. I am going to give you my personal journey into last 30 years of Polish foreign policy and Poland's place in Europe. I will, of course, concentrate our debate on the current state of Poland's place in the wider European context. But to understand it, I think it's necessary to go through the journey of the years of since 1989, and to understand how the context of European politics allowed Poland to be in the place where it is now, and where it always thought it would belong. But of course, today's world, today's Europe is full of unimaginable challenges that were not imagined years before. So there are question marks over Poland's place in Europe. There are question marks over Europe itself. There are question marks how political movements within Poland are going to respond to those various challenges and various changing environments. My journey will begin in 1989. That was, I hope you see the slide, it's the world of yesterday. You could see Poland in the middle of the Warsaw Pact, Soviet sphere of influence, actually Soviet sphere of dominance in Europe. Poland in 1989, when our journey begins, was surrounded by free states with rigid communist Orthodox system. Poland was the most liberal of all the communist states in the late 80s, but still it was surrounded by, as I say, rigid, very Orthodox, unreformed countries. And only a sign of hope, some reforms started in Soviet Union, and that gave Poland much more space to begin its return, as we said at that time, return to Europe, regaining its place. That signs from the Soviet Union gave hope in 1988, 1989, for some hope for half independence, which was called Finlandization. Finland was the model, a country that was fully free internally, but dependent on the Soviet Union externally. When a few months after Poland formed its government, first non-communist government in 1989, in August, September, a few months later, there was no more rigid communist wall surrounding Poland from the wider Europe. So Poland, starting in 1990, rushed towards full independence. And that was the word of yesterday. And I will have to, okay. I will have to, my presentation has stopped. I will do it again. And that is where it, again, you can see my map. Yeah, that's the second part of my story. To understand how the years in 1990s developed, the early years of 1990s, how Poland was able to peacefully eject itself from the chains of communism and Soviet dominance. You have to understand set major points of orientation, how it all developed. First of all, we should never forget that communism ended peacefully, and that Soviet dominance ended peacefully, and that the Soviet Union itself collapsed relatively peacefully. Without peace at that time, Europe would have looked very differently. Some people today tend to underestimate that major point of orientation, that all the collapse of Soviet dominance over Central and Eastern Europe was peaceful. And peaceful was also unification of Germany. In contradiction to previous unification attempts to unify German nation in 19th century or in the 30s, in the 20th century, when Hitler, Germany wanted to unify all lands where German-speaking people lived. So that the unification of Germany was peaceful, and peacefully Germany integrated itself into Western structures. That allowed quick and final recognition of Polish Western border that ended hundreds of years of rivalry between Poland and Germany, especially the last 250 years. And that was the context in Central and Eastern Europe. The context in Western Europe was that in response to what happened in Central and Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the European community, as it was called, began to inch towards political and economic union, not without difficulties, not without pitfalls, but the answer of Western Europe to events in the East and the unification of Germany was building more integrated European structure, more integrated political and economic union with its own currency. As I mentioned, not without difficulties, but yes, the countries of Central Europe, as Poland, who almost immediately claimed to aspire to join European structure, had also to adjust their understanding of European integration to keep to be updated, to keep the speed of understanding what is happening to the west of Poland's and Czech border. That wasn't the Europe itself was changing, and to aspire to join it required understanding of the new processes in the West. I would like also to point that, of course, peaceful end of communism did not mean peace everywhere. War in Yugoslavia raged on, but due to Yugoslavia's position in Europe, it was neither part of the East, neither part of the West, somehow in the between. War in Yugoslavia was played in a relative isolation of the events in Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Baltic states. It did not affect the rapid changes in Poland, in Czechoslovakia. So as tragic as the war in Yugoslavia was, it did not affect the profound changes north from Yugoslavia itself. And of course, in 1991, we have to remember that Russia itself became very destabilized, not only due to changes in geopolitics, but also after the collapse of the Soviet social system. Russia became very, very different from the Soviet Union, and it also exported some kind of instability due to the collapse of social order in Russia itself. Immediately after the end of communism, already in 1991, Poland looked for ways to reintegrate itself and escape from reintegrate into the European structures and escape as much as possible from the collapsing Warsaw Pact and Comecon structures. So, for instance, it formed the so-called Weimar Triangle in exactly 30 years ago in 91. Germany and France helped Poland pull itself out of the East, that symbolized instability and question marks over the future. At the same time, Visegrad 3, later Visegrad 4, after the collapse of Czechoslovakia, peaceful collapse and friendly collapse of Czechoslovakia, unlike Yugoslavia, Visegrad 4, group of countries that were the most advanced in reforming itself and the most advanced on the way to the West, different also from the Baltic states, who were very quickly reforming themselves, but still a question mark over their ability to survive, and they were not recognized as independent states as only late 91. Whereas Poland and Czechoslovakia, Hungary were recognized immediately because they were recognized as formally sovereign states. So that was easier for them to advance on the way to reintegrate into Western Europe. I also want to point out that that's also underestimated today, that unlike 1918, 1919, 1920, Poland's independence of 1989, 1990 was, let's say, let's put it that way, it was easier to achieve because Poland was already a state, a nation state. There were borders of Poland, there were Polish institutions. Poland was formally independent, although dominated by the Soviet Union, but not unlike events in 100 years ago when Poland re-emerged as a nation on the map of Europe. It did not have clarified borders. It did not have recognized borders. It had to draw borders at conference tables or in real bloody wars. And that fate, luckily, we avoided that fate in 1989. What we had to do was to repair the economy, which was bankrupt after 40 years of real socialist, communist economy. And also we had to find ourselves into new architecture of Europe, but we didn't have to draw our borders. We only had to make new arrangements with new countries that emerge on our borders, like New Germany, or new countries to the east, like Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, to recognize existing borders. So that is very important because the country did not have to refine itself again. Other institutions that Poland was quick to join, Council of Baltic Sea States, initiated by Germany and Denmark. Today, this Council of Baltic Sea States is interesting because there are members of that council are in the EU, in NATO. There are neutral states, and there is Russia, which is very aggressive, and the Baltic Sea is seen as one of the new confrontation lines in contemporary Europe. At that time, it was one of those new structures, undeclared, informal alliances like Visegrad Four or Weimar Triangle, or this formal council that were beginning to reshape Poland's place in Europe. Also, Central European Initiative, which collapsed also under the weight of the Yugoslav war. But it was at one time interesting that there was a chain of countries that formed this Central European Initiative as new entity in the post-communist, post-Iron Curtain world. It collapsed. I would like to point you to what I have written to the left. Looks like Free Seas Initiative. Find the difference. I will come to it later. It's important to know, because today in Poland there is much talk about Central European identity, new Central European structures. It's important to note how various Central European, so-called Central European initiatives ended, what their fate was. And of course, the most important process that helped Poland to be where it is today was the enlargement of the European Union and of NATO. This is the map of NATO, how it expanded, blue color, NATO states. This process was not obvious at the beginning of the 90s, but due to intensive lobbying by Poland, due to very rapid changes in the former Soviet Union, instability in Russia, and due to some rethinking of strategic concepts in the United States and in some countries of Europe, above all Germany, the new United Germany, NATO enlargement was possible. There were important milestones on the way to NATO enlargement. 94, when the first decisions how to proceed with requests to join NATO from Poland or Czech Republic were made. Then some years of dissertation and debates and discussions, not least in the United States, that was not as obvious as it looks today. There were many people who argued against extending NATO into countries like Poland. But finally, in 1996, 97, the decision was taken that NATO should take into more countries, that they should benefit from their role in peaceful end of communism. In 97, I remember in Madrid, I was at the time in Madrid at the summit of NATO with President Clinton, President Kwaśniewski, President Havel. Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary were invited into NATO. Some months later, in December 97, at the summit of European Union in Luxembourg, where I also attended that summit as a journalist, EU invited some countries, including Poland, to start talks on the EU membership. And then that talks actually started. The invitation was in 97 in December, and the talks started in, as far as I remember, early 98 in March in Brussels. In spring 98, the United States Senate ratified the enlargement of NATO. That was major milestone in the, after that ratification by US Senate, 86 senators, much more than the required 2/3. There were, of course, fears that not enough senators would vote for that, but much more voted than required. Many of you from the United States probably remember that intensive campaign to persuade the senators to vote for it. When the Senate ratified enlargement of NATO, Poland became a de facto member of the alliance 1 year before it actually joined. It was invited to major meetings, and all other parliaments actually voted without any hesitation to ratify it, including the German parliament, which ratified it, and all the major parties of German political scene ratified NATO and the NATO enlargement. I remember I made an interview with Jan Nowak-Jeziorański, the late Polish eminent émigré, and he told me just hours after the ratification by Senate, I quoted from Polish, young man, that is what he said to me on the phone. I did not have the recording, I wish I had. He said to me, young man, I have lived enough long, not only to see Poland independent, but also to see Poland secure. I'm so happy, so happy. So I remember that moment when this famous personality was watching the ratification of NATO. And what is important to note from today's perspective also is that at that moment, people like Nowak-Jeziorański, Zbigniew Brzeziński, and most of the eminent Polish politicians and experts argued that NATO and EU membership is necessary condition for Poland to have good relations to Russia. And that is what Poland also told the Russians, like Wałęsa said it to Yeltsin several times. We have to be in NATO not because we hate you or we despise you, no, because we want to feel secure. And when we feel secure, finally, our journey begins, our journey ends, we can re-engage in new Europe with you on various levels. But understand us, our place is there, not by you. We can be active in your, with you, we can do great things together, but the condition for that is Poland's membership in NATO, and in the EU as well. And that proved not realistic because Poland's relations with Russia deteriorated as quickly as Poland was progressing towards NATO and EU, and they are very, very bad today, actually, I would say, it's my private description, but almost to zero level contacts. Only the necessary interstate and international contacts between Poland and Russia take place, nothing more. And of course, we could debate hours about that, whether it's good or not. After 2014, of course, all the rules of Poland-Russian relation changed. Russian aggression against Ukraine. Poland wanted to upgrade its NATO membership, not only being a formal member, but also to invite Western allies, above all the United States, but also other allies, to actively be present in Poland as a deterrence to Russia. Of course, again, we tend to underestimate the international context of which it happened in the 90s and at the beginning of 2000. People tend to say that, well, politics at that time was not that complicated, everything went smoothly. Poland wanted to join NATO and it finally did. Poland wanted to join EU. It was all decided. It was also the question of time. I don't think that is the right description of that. I have put several dates and events that shaped the international context of the extension of NATO and the EU into Poland. Poland enters NATO in 1999 in March, and 2 weeks later, the war in Kosovo begins. Just weeks after, Poland finds itself in questioning, okay, we join NATO, but NATO is at war and is beyond its membership area. What to do with that, participate or not? In 1999, Berlin becomes capital of United Germany. Finally, all the major institutions move there. So there's new weight of gravity, new center of gravity in Europe. That's also important from Polish perspective. Putin becomes leader of Russia in 1999. Just months after Poland joins NATO, there's a new dynamic in Russia. EU is preparing to take into new members. It ratifies Nice Treaty for new members, but without new members. It's very, very interesting situation. Then September 11 attacks, and Article 5 is invoked, and NATO goes to war. but not in Europe, somewhere else, in a remote district of Hindu Kush. So again, no one questions Polish participation, but it's a changing of psyche. Aha, NATO, okay, we are now in a globalized politics. We are not somewhere on the border between EU, Germany, and Ukraine and Russia, but we are in the middle of events. At that time, Poland concludes EU talks. It prepares itself for EU referendum, important milestone. At the same time, there is major division in the Western Alliance over the Iraq war. Just months before there is EU referendum, Poland sides with the US and the UK against France and Germany over the Iraq war. How will it influence Polish membership? Will it change anything? I remember Jan Nowak-Jeziorański again. He said it's very difficult choice for Poland to side with the US in defense arena, and in economic and political terms, we should side with France and Germany. Very difficult moment. People forget about it. Then the referendum, then Poland enters EU. Immediately after it enters EU, in May 2004, in late 2004, revolution starts in Ukraine, major event in Poland's neighborhood with all the international actors. We have to pull all the weight behind, with all our newly regained weight, we have to pull European diplomats into Kiev to intervene diplomatically in Ukrainian affairs, just in the neighborhood of Russia, which watches warily and becomes again an aggressive state because it sees that Ukraine is gravitating peacefully towards Europe, thanks also to Polish efforts. And that starts again another dynamic in Europe and to the east from Poland. Putin restarts Cold War. In his infamous Munich speech, he wants to declare to the West he doesn't recognize, he doesn't want to get along with the new realities. He doesn't want to allow the West to dominate the world. Russia will be back, he says, and he declares his own version of activities. A year later, he attacks Georgia. So again, just after we entered, months later, we have major events concerning our new strategic partner, which is Ukraine. And one important event, 2007, Poland joins the Schengen passport-free area. It's very important because even people who are very skeptical of the European Union today, even those who think that EU integration has gone too far, they never, or almost never challenge the necessity of being in the Schengen area. That has its own meaning for today. So today, Poland and the European context. You can see this map. Blue color is the EU states. UK is, of course, outside UK. Western Balkans enlargement is delayed. It has nothing to do with Poland. The dynamics in Balkans, again, doesn't concern Poland anymore. Turkey is in the customs union, no chance of membership. It doesn't affect Poland. But the last point, Ukraine actually joins EU in, I would say, 1/4. It's not half membership, it's 1/4 membership, but it's a major change. Ukraine is in association agreement. So all the hopes of Polish elites to extend European model of life, and that in that context to extend Poland's dreams of bringing countries to our east, lying between us and Russia into European context, the so-called Jagiellonian doctrine, is being partly at least realized when it comes to Ukraine. That changes the environment very significantly. Economic migration of Poles to Western Europe, very important factor of talking about Polish links to Europe. Two countries top the list with more than 700,000 people in Germany and more than 800,000 people going to the UK to work. UK, of course, is outside the EU now, but there are thousands of people who have linked their own personal life with the extended Europe. Within Europe, Poland, it's important part of Schengen area, with Poland guarding eastern border of the Schengen area, not only of the EU, but also of Schengen. But Poland decided not to join Eurozone, not to accept European currency. That will have its meaning later. And Eastern Partnership, that is something that I would like to point you to our own context of European integration and extension of Europe again. And Poland is a major player in that, and it should remain so, I hope. In 2008, out of the initiative of Poland and Sweden, two countries that really understand the realities of Eastern Europe, proposed a new kind of agreement, new kind of level of cooperation between the countries lying to the east of Poland, lying to the east of EU. And that partnership actually began with Ukraine, then began with Moldova, Georgia, other countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, and even Belarus, with Lukashenko also at that time joined it. Russia was very, very angry about it, very angry. Russians saw this modest and limited diplomatic, economic and cultural and scientific exchange, less visa restrictions for citizens of that countries as a major as a major I would say even attack on Russian interests. So Eastern Partnership is one of the concepts that Poland within it wanted to concept of European integration, and also of, as I said, the Jagiellonian doctrine of let's not extend Poland way of life, but let's unite Polish aspirations of having independent non-Russian dominated states to our east with wider European context, wider European cooperation. And that proved to be effective, and that proved to be not to be effective. In case of Ukraine, it went further after the revolution of 2013, 2014. Ukraine became a partly integrated country within the EU. So the extension of the upgrade of that cooperation is much bigger, much deeper. In the case of Georgia, also in the case of Moldova, those countries are gravitating, regardless of internal difficulties, they're gravitating towards European Union. In case of Belarus, we see that today partnership is suspended, but it must be reminded that within Poland as a member of the EU and NATO, for many years, together with countries like Germany, saw Lukashenko himself as a kind of guarantee that Belarus would have at least elements of sovereignty. That proved to be wrong, because Lukashenko, trying to rescue his own power, trying to rescue himself and his regime, is pulling Belarus again into Russian domination, under Russian domination. But for some years there was expectation in Poland that not only from the current government, but also the previous government and some governments like Germany and Sweden, that creative engagement with Lukashenko would allow Belarus to have limited, but still some limited, interesting, important segments of sovereignty. And that's why it won't be just purely Russian province. The question of Belarus, of course, is absolutely open. The future of Belarus is open. Let's hope the democratic change will end that history of that regime. It has major implications for Poland's future and Poland's position in Europe. I would say that for today, no one really have any kind of idea of how to influence and how to reshape and shape events inside Belarus. But it all started with Eastern Partnership. That was possible when Poland felt safe and assertive, as much as possible, assertive in the EU. And then in 2015, it all started with the refugee crisis. This crisis, a major crisis in European politics that shapes politics of Europe until today, and also politics of Poland. Many questions about European integration, European future, limits of European integration, also possible even breakup of the European Union, date back to 2015. It is very, very important moment. And also Poland played its part, controversial part in the events of 2015 and 2016. So after that introduction of the context of the previous 30 years, 25 years, I'm coming to the events of today, 2015, 2021, new challenges, new questions about Europe, about its ability to function internally and externally in the new world that also affected very much European Union itself, with Brexit, with immigration crisis, with financial crisis a little bit earlier, but waves, the sonic waves of financial crisis still resonate today. And of course, pandemics has made some social problems even greater. New challenges, new solutions. Is Poland on board? What are the new challenges? On the left, you can see a map of European Union and European neighborhood. European Union is a colossus in terms of economy, in terms of science, technology, but it has relatively very limited power in terms of diplomacy and hard power, regardless of the fact that even after the United Kingdom left the EU, France has nuclear capabilities and many NATO allies are members of the European Union. So the clout of the European Union is limited, but the EU wants to be to expand its soft power with missions, with different kind of activities in various places like Ukraine, like Georgia, but also like Iraq, like Sahel in Africa. It doesn't give the EU its weight, proper weight. EU wants to be actively engaged, but it doesn't give EU its weight. It doesn't make EU a colossus in politics and hardware. So that's why Poland is, especially after 2014, does not invest a lot in EU's foreign policy. It only uses EU to influence, if it is possible, to influence events to the east of our borders, if it is possible, of course. And also after 2014 and after 2015, the immigration crisis, questions of security and conditionalities, modalities of security of Poland are of utmost importance. So that's why Poland is taking care of the near abroad, of the eastern flank of NATO, how to present itself as a secure place in Europe. All these nightmares of Poland's, of the nightmares of being again in the middle of a nightmarish conflict have come back to Poland. I remember the former Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who said, "Oh, we hope we will be able to send kids again to school on the 1st of September." He said that on the in 2014. 1st of September is the first year of school year in Poland, but it's also the day of the aggression of Nazi Germany against Poland. He was so much emotional about events in Crimea and in Eastern Ukraine. So that's why Poland invested heavily in persuading US and European allies into moving its diplomatic and military weight to strengthen the so-called eastern flank. And this was and is the most important goal in terms of security for Poland, to upgrade its membership. In the 90s, there were dreams that if we enter, we are in NATO, also in the EU, but above all in NATO, our security will be guaranteed by itself. No one believes that anymore. Poland wants to upgrade its membership by building a permanent presence of Western military alliance in Poland. And it sees that as the only guarantee that membership in NATO will not only be formal. So since the war in Georgia in 2008, actually Poland invested heavily in trying to persuade Western allies of preparing plans for future conflict in Eastern Europe, prepare some contingency schemes, how to possibly in future react to new threats. And in 2014, President Komorowski in Wales advocated that NATO sends troops to Poland and Baltic states. Symbolic, but still significant. For the first time ever, Western allies landed in countries like Estonia or Lithuania, or sometimes in Poland. So this new reality redefines Polish thinking about Europe. To the right, it's the map of how Poland and the US are extending military cooperation to upgrade Polish status in the Western alliance, to build enough infrastructure, enough presence of US troops and other Western allies to create credible deterrence. And this is absolutely bipartisan issue in Poland. No one in Poland questions Polish membership in NATO and the need to upgrade it by keeping permanent infrastructure and permanent presence of Western troops in the territory of Poland and in the Baltic states, the same security area. No one questions that. Not a single. There's almost no one in Poland that claims to be a reasonable politician, either from the left or from the right, that would claim that the situation changed so much after events in Ukraine in 2014 and later, that no one really. If someone claims we should not be in NATO, or we should not invite US troops or Western troops to Poland, at least to exercise permanently, that's a non-starter in politics. And to the left, there's this map, external immigration, the EU and the surrounding territories. Migration is defining European politics, the questions of identity, Europe's borders, security, who is actually defending who, how much of migration the EU is capable of absorbing. Those questions also run deep into Polish politics and Polish responses. I will talk about it soon. But in wider European context, migration became the overarching issue of European politics when it comes to Europe as a whole and when it comes to every nation state. So I really think that European immigration politics, or failures of European immigration politics, will define Europe's future and Poland's place in it. Although there were no refugees from Middle East willing to settle in Poland in 2015, 2016. There were no refugees from Northern Africa willing to settle in Poland. Poland actually drummed up this issue that Polish identity and European identity is under threat, and that had consequences to Poland's understanding and Polish understanding of Europe. Poland today has hundreds of thousands of citizens from Ukraine and other post-Soviet states who peacefully live and work and study and make families and integrate into wider Polish society. Polish government, the Law and Justice Party, uses that argument when Poland is being criticized for not accepting refugees. But Poland says we have some more than 1 million Ukrainians. There are major differences on that issue. In Europe, countries like Germany and France do not accept Poland's stance that those people are the same as refugees, that it's different to accept legal economic migration from Ukraine to Poland, and it's different to declare unwillingness, unpreparedness to accept anyone from war-ravaged areas like Syria, for instance, or Libya. It's the same, they argue, Polish Western neighbors argue, it's the same as we absorb hundreds of thousands of Polish people who are not refugees, but they are simply citizens of Poland who migrated for good or for some years to the UK, to France, or above all to Germany today. So in this European and global context, it also resonates in Polish politics. What is the EU for today? How should we define Poland's membership and purposes of the EU to make it still attractive and important for Poland? What is the EU for? To keep peace. Younger generation this answer doesn't resonate with younger people because they never saw war. They only see wars in the internet or on the TV screens. For me, it resonates. When it is to keep peace in Europe or around? Is it to build prosperity? It's very important, that question, to put it openly. Is the EU for building prosperity? Because in some countries of Europe, like Greece or Italy or Spain, that question mark is important since the financial crisis. In Poland, no, because in Poland still it's a tool of helping Poland to get away out of civilizational backwardness. But it's an important question. We should openly ask it. Is the EU to keep Germany in, to keep Germany engaged peacefully? In modern Germany should always be integrated into Europe, not outside Europe. Is it to keep Russia out, or is it to help nations like Poland or Lithuania to engage with Russia, but through European Union? Is it the EU to transform our model of life in terms of politics, in terms of economy, in terms of ecology, in terms of identity? Or is it to defend? It should defend it actively. Again, another question which resonates very strongly in France, not in Poland. Is it to protect against globalization? Or is it a tool of globalization? What is the EU actually? Is it an international trading bloc that is one of the major machines of globalization? Or is it a political and trading bloc that protects European way of life, European economy, European social model? That is one of the crucial questions put to the society, to the public opinion in France. After the UK, it's the most important country when it comes to the question of future of Europe. It's not in Germany. In Germany, Europe is still seen as an organization for both, for advancing globalization and also of protecting against globalization. Whereas in France, there are doubts. In Poland, that will come. So political class should be prepared when younger generation, when globalization gets off the rails, should be prepared to answer it. Is the EU to become global power? If yes, in what terms? In hard power, soft power? It has many languages. It has the EU, the UK has left, the English language power has left. So what kind of global significance does the EU have for future? How does it, again, resonate in our immediate neighborhood? Should it be superpower or superstate? This is what Tony Blair said in Warsaw in 2000, and major speech. Of course, we know how the story of European politics of Tony Blair ended, but he made a major speech in 2000, and he declared, Europe should never become a super state, but a superpower. Is it possible to differentiate, or should it never be a superpower and not a super state? Should be as it is, a civic, peaceful trading bloc, very strong international cooperation of nations of Europe that want to put behind their past and want to live peacefully in security and in new ecological transformation. This is also a question which we should in Poland put ourselves into the public opinion, to prepare Polish people for changes that will definitely come in wider European context. Because what I want to say is that Polish debate over Europe about its place, whether we finally mission accomplished, whether we finally landed where we wanted and that everything is fine, that is no longer the problem. Events around us change the dynamic of any kind of European debate. It will come to Poland. We have to be prepared for it. Does Poland have answers for these questions? These are questions I have written. Of course, there are many others. Ecological transformation. You have to keep updated what countries like Germany or France are going to do, because we have to still go after them and imitate sometimes. Or should we be prepared for this ecological transformation and build a leader of ecological transformation? This is, no one really debates that in Poland in hard terms. There's time to, Poland is mature enough to put itself the same questions. Of course, there are answers. And this is how the governing party, in my opinion, sees Europe. The map shows different right-wing parties, sometimes populists, who openly question the current state of Europe or the Europe until 2050. Sometimes the Law and Justice government wants to distance themselves from some of the parties of the right-wing populist countries of Western Europe. Sometimes they clearly want a distance, like from the party of Le Pen in France, because they see it as too pro-Putin, very dangerous to Atlantic security. So Law and Justice has no cooperation with Le Pen. But on the other hand, like Hungary or countries or cooperation with Italian Lega, they are in. So there is this chain of countries that see not maybe eye to eye events in Europe, but they have the same agenda to change it, to change Europe from inside. So the ruling Law and Justice Party and the president want a new EU, definitely. They really want to, at least verbally, they want the EU to be organization of nation states, period. If it is possible, that's another question, but they really would like EU to be an international European organization of nation states. They want single market, definitely. Law and Justice is not against single market. They want a common market because it gives Poland its economic prosperity and economic possibilities. They are very strong for Schengen. Some of the members of the right-wing camp says, yes, Schengen, but only if Poland retains sovereignty over immigration. Euro currency, definite no. Definite no. There is no question of Poland joining Eurozone in any kind of constellation under current government. Identity and values ideas. For the right-wing government, EU is too liberal, not enough traditionalist, that it went away from its roots in Christianity and traditional European model of culture. Definite distance to Germany. Many, we hear it many times over, that Poland should not be a client state, a satellite state of Germany. And that is the defining geopolitical issue of Law and Justice Party. definite distance to Brussels, whatever it means. It's sometimes difficult to Brussels as who knows what it is. Brussels is the enemy of common people of Poland. Never mind that Brussels is made out of member states and citizens of member states. Idealization of Central Europe and Free Seas Initiative. I will talk about it in a second. Polexit. Law and Justice is against Polexit, but there are some people within that broader right-wing camp that says, okay, it's not realistic, but let's talk about it, because maybe one day, why not? You know, heaven did not come down on England and the United Kingdom. It exists, so there's no need not to talk about Polexit. It's very unpopular in Poland still, so that's why there's no issue of that. Very strong links to the United States, but again, question mark. The links to Trump administration were also very ideological, on the same lines as above, against immigration, about against current liberal elites. Now, with Biden administration, we don't know how the US links would develop. I hope there will be not any clash of ideology, because Poland needs strong US presence. And NATO is central when it comes to Europe's defense, visible and clear distance from that. A Free Seas Initiative, it looks the map as it was the Central European Initiative almost, without Italy and Yugoslavia and Baltic states coming. The Law and Justice government always repeats that this is only EU state initiative. But it was seen by many countries outside Poland as a kind of anti-German initiative. So peace was persuaded to allow Germany to be an observer status. Free Seas Initiative, it was also very much promoted by Trump administration. How will it develop? I don't know. I think there are two major question marks over that initiative. It is the future of relations of Free Seas Initiative to Germany, which is the economic powerhouse of Central Europe as well, and the future of links of Free Seas Initiative to Ukraine. Ukraine, which has its ports in the Black Sea, and this is the Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Sea initiative. I can't see it, and I'm not giving it any significant realistic perspectives without Ukraine. But it will provoke Russia. We don't know, but Law and Justice heavily invests in promoting Free Seas. The opposition, Polish language opinion poll, so I will say 76% of Poles, Polska here, 76% of Poles feel themselves to be citizens of the European Union. So that gives the context of Polish European debate, and also a lot of context to opposition, from the left to the center. EU is central to Poland's place and identity and development. No question about that. There's no doubt about Poland to be and remain and shape the EU, because Poland needs EU, and EU is central to Polish future. Weimar Triangle should be the main engine of Poland's membership in the EU. Central Europe is very important. Visegrad 4 is very important. Even the Free Seas important is Free Seas Initiative, but it should never be seen as an alternative to current EU. NATO is central to Poland's security, no question about that. US is central to Poland's defense, no question about that. But Europe's defense, Poland should participate in European, led by France probably, initiatives to upgrade European Union as a hard power and entity. Euro currency, yes, but population is skeptical. There must be a change into constitution, and no one would dare to rush into currency without a referendum. So yes, we are for Euro, but we have to consult the people of Poland. And there is, of course, a lot of talk in opposition that Poland risks isolation if it stays permanently outside Eurozone. Law and Justice accept that and wants Poland to stay outside the Eurozone. The opposition says no, that leads to second-class membership in the future. Eastern policy, definitely crucial to Poland, but through EU institutions. So Jagiellonian doctrine without European context is futile. And that was this.
Thank you so much for this wide-ranging, fascinating lecture. I urge the audience to ask questions through the question and answer Q&A little app at the bottom of your screen. Before we go on to questions, can I just put a little promotion? On Wednesday, March 10th, also at 12 Eastern Time in the United States, Dr. Erica Lerner from Concordia University in Montreal, who is, by the way, a U of M alumna, will present a paper on terribly close Polish vernacular artists face the Holocaust. This is organized by the Museum Studies program, but it is co-sponsored by the Copernicus Center, and I urge you all to come and listen to and watch her presentation. So thank you once again. And some of the questions that we saw that came through, you answered in due course during your speech, because it covered such a wide variety of subjects. So let's go and take a rather complex question. I was struck by your comments early in your presentation on revitalized conversations in Poland today on the country's Central Europeanness. Would you say that these conversations began as early as 1984 with the publication of Milan Kundera's thesis, The Tragedy of Central Europe, or is this a more recent development now that Poland has become integrated in these larger Western power structures? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, as far as I remember, the debates over Central Europeanism began in the mid 80s. I think it was a kind of substitute of the dreams of become West, and also a kind of giving ourselves self-confidence. We are not part of the Soviet Union. We are different. Prague and Budapest are the sisters, and Krakow are the sister city of Vienna, not the sister city of Novosibirsk, with all respect for Novosibirsk. And that was, this is what I remember. Yes, we are Central European, and there were Central Europeans' achievements in terms of arts, literature, and Central Europeans showed many times after the Second World War where they belong and where they want to belong. But that was also in the context where no one reasonably imagined that that Central Europe once would have the chance in living period to decide for itself if it is Central European or not, if it wants to be Europe, if it wants to shed the Soviet domination off. And then in 1989, with rapid collapse, peaceful collapse of the Soviet dominance over Central Europe, that debate re-emerged. What I remember is that it re-emerged in the wider context, how countries of Central Europe might converge together into common strategy to join the emerging political union of Europe. So there was no talk of alternative to Western Europe. There was a talk of pulling ourselves together, with the Hungarians, with the Poles, with the Czechs, with the Lithuanians. Let's pull together. Let's go together. We will make the difference in Europe. It wasn't that easy. Central Europe immediately collapsed as any kind of political entity in the 90s. I showed it. There were attempts to create pentagonal, hexagonal, 5 states, 6 states, then Central European Initiative. No one dares to mention it anymore. This organization actually exists, but who cares about it? Yugoslavia, a country that was at the crossroads of Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans, collapsed in bloody war. So all this idealization of Central Europe ended with the same fate. But today in Poland, I would broadly say the right-wing camp is reviving the idea of Central Europe as a counterweight to the European order dominated by Germany and France. Of course, it has its own Polish tradition of Polish ambitions to build a federation of independent, non-Russian dominated states at the outset of 20th century after the First World War. It did not finish well. We will celebrate 100 years of Riga peace treaty with the Soviet Union, which effectively ended any kind of dreams of federation of independent, non-Russian dominated states of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania. It's a sad anniversary. And but today the right-wing camp says, yes, we should build a new Central European weight under US patronage, at least in case of Donald Trump, to counterbalance the dominant forces of Germany and France. I think I find it unrealistic that it would be built in this way. As I said, in my opinion, this is my opinion, 2 question marks are important in this project. What is the role of Germany? Because as much as many people on the right, in the right-wing camp, want Germany to be a Western European state separate from Central European identity, I think it is incorrect. Germany also plays significant part in Central Europe, not to mention economy, where when Visegrad states together, the 4 states, are bigger trading partner for Germany than France. So Germany has its own Central European dimension. And the second question mark is Ukraine. And all the tradition of Poland's dreams of federation in Central Europe were also to destroy the Soviet dominance over Central Europe and Eastern Europe on national lines and build a sovereign Ukraine. I think without Ukraine, it won't have any big meaning. That's my opinion. I might be wrong. The United States of Joe Biden is also willing to support the Free Seas Initiative with some millions of dollars, but have in mind that EU subventions from the EU to Central Europe, at least in Poland, are in tens of billions of euros. So there's some kind of imbalance. To repeat myself, yes, there is a talk about Central Europe. Will it be seen as an alternative to existing European structures, or will it be seen as a project on sub-European level to advance countries like Poland or Baltic states in terms of social life and economics and energy security? We'll see.
Well, thank you very much. That was a fascinating answer. I think I should thank Arthur Mengozi, our student who asked this question, because it gave us such an interesting perspective. Can I ask you a different question? This is, as someone wrote, Christopher Chozepa, perhaps not directly related to your talk, but I was wondering if, as a journalist at an independent media outlet, Mr. Sawinski has a response to the recent events in the news regarding the media repolarization. How does PiS's hostility to foreign, especially German ownership of media companies, intersect with PiS's desire to remain Central European independent from Western European influence?
If I may, I would decline to comment on media because I am a member of media. I don't want to be judged in my own case. It's a different topic than my presentation. It's much more complex, and I don't want to in this audience externally. I don't want to engage in any kind of discussions about that. It's not my topic. I'm not an expert. I was invited to speak as Jacek Stawiski, who
No,
has
it's
witnessed
fine.
a little.
Fair enough.
Let me decline to comment. It's not the topic. I can debate issues of internal politics regarding international politics. That's what I have done, but not the problem of me.
No, fair enough. So let me go back and ask a question that is more directly related to one of the things you said, because you mentioned a number of times the 3 Cs initiative. And there's a question about how does today's fierce Nord Stream 2 sanctions fight affect policy? That is, do you see a US-Polish alignment versus a Berlin-Moscow partnership? What do you see developing there?
Nord Stream is a major issue in Polish politics, and it's a thorny issue in Poland's relations to Germany. The problem with 3 Cs initiative and Nord Stream is that it does not relate directly. 3 Cs initiative will not stop Nord Stream, and countries members of 3 Cs initiative like Austria or even Czech Republic have nothing against Nord Stream. They're cooperating in building Nord Stream. Nord Stream is a project that is seen as a threat to energy security for Poland and Ukraine and Baltic states. That's why I mentioned 3 Cs initiative without Ukraine has some limitations. 3 Cs initiative does not stop Nord Stream. 3 Cs initiative is to build more space of energy security by inviting, for instance, US gas exports to Central Europe through Croatia, through Poland, Scandinavian gas. Yes, 3 Cs initiative is to limit dependency on Russian energy export. That's right. And that's why across parties in Poland, across the spectrum of experts, Nord Stream is seen very negatively, but I don't see that 3 Cs initiative had any kind of tools to stop Nord Stream. And it does not, again, 3 Cs has this existential questions, whether Germany is seen as a threat to Central Europe or a partner of Central Europe, where it is so much engaged economically. And so many countries are, let's put it mildly, dependent on the economy of Germany, like Austria, like Czech Republic, like Poland is dependent. And Ukraine is a country which is the changing factor of European strategic, at least Central and Eastern European strategic. If it survives as a sovereign nation state in Europe, energy security is guaranteed. That's my opinion. So that's why I think that this initiative should open itself towards Ukraine. That's my private opinion.
Well, relating to your answer to this question, the final one, your final thoughts here, there was a question, is there any concern about an influx of Ukrainian refugees coming to Poland given the ongoing conflict there? And I would amplify that question by asking if you want to say something more about how you see because there's a sort of stalemate right now. What do you see as emerging in the Ukrainian conflict, and how does that affect Poland?
The Ukrainian community, in hundreds of thousands living in Poland, most of them do not have anything to do with the conflict. They come to Poland to work, to study, because Poland has made success with all the reservations about current Polish politics towards European Union. When you go to Ukraine, I was there for a 7-day study tour, and I talked to members of Ukrainian politics, Ukrainian civil society, Ukrainian NGOs, Ukrainian parliamentarians, and so on and so on. Even Ukrainians from Canada or the United States who went to Kiev to take positions in government. I was there in 2019 in December, just before pandemics, and everywhere there's talk of Polsce to tak. And in Poland, they made it like this. And in Poland, they resolved this like this. So this is, the mirror image of what we say in Poland. In Germany or in Sweden, the solutions to that social problem is like this. The Ukrainian nation deserves Ukrainian state, and it has existential meaning for Poland, but the Ukrainian, maybe not diaspora, one quarter diaspora here in Poland is here to study, to work, to send money back to Ukraine. Ukraine has its own heavy and strong, complicated social problems. We should help. There are many Ukrainians also in other countries like Germany or Austria or even France or outside the EU, in the UK. When it comes to conflict, yes, of course, there are some, at least young Ukrainian males who went to Poland not to be called into army. Definitely there are some people, and that it affects them. When it comes to clear political refugees from the war-torn areas, I think there's problem more of internal refugees within Ukraine than to Poland. That is how I see it.
Well, I think that we're running out of time, but I'd like to thank you once again. We have many other questions actually, which is an indication of the interest and of the success of your lecture. And I'd like to thank you again on behalf of the Center for this fascinating lecture. And we hope to see you here in person in better times.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And thank you everyone for participating and for asking questions and for listening.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Krakow.
Thank you. Greetings from Ann Arbor.